Okay, let's jump to the lecture of today. We want to talk about the Sys module. You know the concept of the module. We discussed that in another week. That was if you want to have a couple of functions, you don't want to bring all those functions in your main file, which you are written the main Python file, and you want to keep them separate from your code. So you create a new file, and then you save it, and then it is called a module. And then you can import that module into your program, and then you can call all the functions you have already defined inside that module. So you know the meaning of module. And we have lots of built-in modules and lots of packages, libraries in Python. You can import those modules into your program to use actually the capability they have introduced to Python. So one of the most important modules we are interested in is Sys, S-Y-S. In this week, we want to talk about the Sys module. We want to see what is the story of the Sys. Okay, so you know, in terminal, we can call our script like this. If we have a script like hello.py, we can call it and we can say Python hello.py. And if it is Python 3, probably we can say Python 3 hello.py. Okay, in the terminal, when we invoke a command, we often pass command line argument. So your script might not have any specific argument, etc. So just you pass the name of the file, Python hello.py. For example, this hello.py may just print something or may do something. It doesn't need any input or argument, something like that. So that's the case. So in this case, you say Python, the name of the file.py. So here, hello.py is a command line argument. It tells the Python interpreter which script to run. Okay? And we know from the module CA114 that in the shell, we can have access to command line argument within the shell script. So using this code, this line of code in the shell story, you can have access to the commands, to the arguments of any script. We can do something similar with this in here. So we can do something similar in here. So in Python, the built-in Python module Sys provides access to a number of system-specific parameters and functions. So that's a module, like I said. And in any module, we have lots of functions probably. So then we can have access to that, to those functions and parameters if we import that module. We want to import Sys. So if you say import Sys in the beginning of your module, your code, then you would have access to the functions and the specific parameters of that specific module. Okay? This is similar to when we import a module, which we have written ourselves. You remember we discussed that, I guess, last week or a week before. So that's the whole story. Okay, so one of the systems, let's jump into the Sys and see what's important for us now. There are lots of functions and modules, but for this week, we want to focus on some specific functions of the Sys module. So there is something called argv, standing for argument vector in Sys, which we can call them. So I have received a no from Kandel. What do you mean by Kandel? What do you mean by no? Anyway, so like I said, we have a function which is called argv inside Sys, and it stands for argument vector. This is a list of all the argument, command line arguments. So for example, if you say print sys.arg, it will say it does something for you. Let's see what's happened. So I want to call Python args.py and then 1, 2, 3. That's the name of the script I have written in Python, and these are the parameters I'm passing into this script to be interpreted by Python. Okay? The output should be something like that. So probably here we can see a little bit more clear of that. So imagine that's the file args.py, which we called in here. Remember, we say Python args.py 1, 2, 3. Okay, what is this? What could be this script file? This file could be something like that. I have imported this in the beginning, and then I have a counter set to 0. Then I have a while loop. I'll say as long as I is less than the length of the argument system. What does this guy do actually? argv. Argv takes the arguments you pass to the alignment side function. So what are these? So let's see. Then I want to print them. So if I run this line, this command line in the command line, Python args.py123, and if that's inside the argv, what would happen? This guy generates all the argument I have given to the command line. So this thing. So what does it generate? It generates something like that. So if I generate a while loop like that, what is the length of this args, sys arg.v? The length of that is 4, because that's a list of 4 components. Okay, all the time the first element inside this list is the name of the Python file you used to pass to the function. Okay, so the first thing is this, and then that would be the argument. So if I pass it like Python args.py, which is the name of my file, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on, then it would be args.py 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. If I change the name of the file, Python args. Let's say args1.py, and some arguments, it would be args1.py, and so on. So the first element all the time would be the name of the script, Python script you have passed to in here. How I can get this information? By importing sys. So if you import sys, and if you run sys.argv, what this guy generates? This guy generates this thing. So you could do something different. You could say, for example, a is equal to sys.argv, and then you will have everything in a. Okay. So let's, for example, jump in here, which is a tool. I have a tool in here. So let's, for example, I import, of course, that's Python 3, but it's okay for us for now to see what's the story. So I have I import sys, and then let's see what was the code inside. Let's copy these things, bring it in here. Oh, I stopped sharing. Sorry. Okay, so it is like, where was that? Oh, replace, unpin, yeah, that's more larger now. Okay, so and then let's say I want to paste the things in here. Let's, for example, S is equal to this guy. Let's copy this guy in here first, and then I can even, for example, print S. I'm putting parentheses in here because that's Python 3. In Python 2, you don't need to put parentheses. You can say just print space S, and then I can go through this stuff to see what's happened. So if I run the code, it says, okay, yeah, it looks like I have a problem with the print. Yeah, that's Python 3. So I need to refine it this way, make sure it works properly. Okay, if I run it again. Okay, so I'm here. Yeah, as you can see, just since I have not fit any argument to the function, sys.argv is only the name of the function, which is main.py. That's the result of S. So what is this? This is the result of print S. Why? Because it's sys.argv, and argv is only the name of the function. Because I'm running only the function, I'm not running the function plus some argument, so I don't have any argument. So I have only one element inside this list, which is the name of the function. And then when I come in here, what's the length of this guy? The length of this guy is 1, because like we generated in here, S is just this list of one element. So the loop is executed only once because I have one element. And that's the whole story, okay? So that was an example of this. So if I run the code, everything in here, and then I have more than one parameter inside that loop function, I can do that. So the first function we reviewed inside sys is argv. Then let's recap. Argv takes some parameter, can pass some parameters, and then it can generate a list of the things for you, which is the first element is the name of the script, and then the rest of the elements are the arguments you have passed to the function. So if we run then this guy, we will receive these things if we run this code. In each line, actually, we print one of the elements of this, right? Okay. Okay, example 2. Write a Python script which accepts some number of integers as command line argument and output only the sum of integers. That's the same. So again, you set a summation as total equal to 0 in the beginning. You set a timer in here. Then since you, very similar to this guy, so you say Python, the name of your code, and then the integers. Why? Because here you want to receive some integers and you want to calculate the sum. So you'll say import sys, because we want to take into account the arguments we are feeding to the program. And then we want to calculate the total number of the things in here. Okay, so I is equal to 1, while I less than length, then total is total plus argument, the I argument, and convert it to integer, then change the counter back to top, continue that for all the number of the arguments you have here, and then finally print the total. That's the whole story, right? But while we have started from 1 in here, we used to start the counter from 0, because as you could see in here, the arguments which this guy generates, the first element is, like I said, the name of the file. You don't want to take that into account in calculating the summation. So you start from 1. Like I said here, that's the whole story. So to get rid of that, we can do something like that. Like I did that in here. I say I have S is equal to sysrv, takes everything for me. You can do exactly the same thing, but this time you can say only take the values from the elements from 1 to the end. Just get rid of the first one. Just get rid of the first one, which was the name. Work on this thing. So this way, we don't need to start the counter from 1. We can start the counter from this way. So that's the whole story. That's not the thing you need to do. If you feel happy with these things, that's okay. But if you feel you want to get rid of, you want to comply with all the time, you start from the beginning of the list and do something on the list and finish the thing. That means you want to start from 0, that you can put the arguments, put the things inside this new variable, but this time instead of everything from 1 to the end, getting rid of the first value in the other one. Okay, so that's the first thing we discussed, argue, right? So the next thing we want to talk about are the standard input. You remember we had input and raw input for getting some variable, something from the user. You remember that already. We can do that with the sys also. Inside the sys module, we have stdin, which works, which is kind of a module by itself again inside this module. And that module has a couple of other functions inside. The read line, read, and read lines. These are 3 functions we have inside stdin sys, and you can use them. Like I said, all the time, by far, we used to say import sys. If you don't want to use the other functionality of the sys module, and if you want to use only the stdin functionality, you can say from sys import stdin, right? So you can say, like I said, from sys import stdin. This way, when you want to call it, you don't need to say sys.stdin.readline. So you can say only stdin.readline. You want to make it a little bit more beautiful. If the length of the name of the module is a little bit long, you can say from sys import stdin as, I don't know, let's say S. And then here you can just say s.readline, s.read, s.read lines. So we discussed a few weeks ago, but it was a good idea to recap it again since you are close to the exam. Okay, so we have these three functions. These are some functions inside the stdin which works similar the input and raw input for us. A little bit different. We will discuss that in here. So it could be something like that. Let's discuss all these things together. See what readlines does, what read does, and what read lines it does. Let's go for readline first of all. So if I had some input like that, and then I want to have a script like that, I will import sys first of all, and then I will say from sys, from stdin, run this function. When I run this function, this line, this function, it is ready for me to input something. I input 1. If I run again this one, I can input some other thing. I can input some other thing, and also I can input nothing. And then what would happen? So it gets exactly one line from the standard input when you run readline. Okay, each call of this guy yield the next line of the input. So since I have created 4 lines of the readline, and readline, so I will get 4 different values here. But like I said, each time you run it, you just get 1 line. This later point is new. The empty string is written. So we will discussing this. Let's go together. Any trailing new line character is written within the resulting string. The empty string is written if there is no more input to it. Okay, so empty means that's the end line. But in input, you needed to bring something like end to say to the function that I'm the end of the things. But in raw input, but in here in readline, you don't need to do that. So readline return a string of length 0 if and only if there is no more input to it. So that would be the result. So if you, let me see if I have something like that in here. So I can comment here, here. Then I have these guys in here. Run it, okay? So if we run the code, let's see what happens. So let's exactly have what we have here. See? 3, and then 4, and then nothing. See, just I hit the enter. I didn't put anything, and the function is finished. And then if I want to print what is inside this guy, let me see what is inside this guy. Let's run it again, and then I will say 1. I will just print 1 in here. Okay, 2. Okay, so like you see, it just prints the last line. Since I have got a few of them, and then just it prints the last thing, which is 5. So let's run it again. So I have 4 of these read lines, so it expects me 4 values. 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's finished. And since the last one was empty, I received an empty. If I run it again, if I say 1, 2, let it 3, and then 4, the last one is 4. So that's the whole story of this guy. So you have got this thing. So I don't need to put something like end at the end to tell the function that I'm at the end of putting some variable something to you. So that's the interesting thing, beautiful thing about this guy in comparison to this. What is read? Reads get you whatever you input. So if I instead use this guy, whatever I input to the function, it will be received. So if I comment these lines in here again, as you can see, if I go for the read, so let's see what happens. So, and then print, let's see, print s. Let's see, length of s, type of s, that would be interesting. Let's say print s, see what happens in here. So let's run it. Okay, I would say crazy stuff in here. So as you can see, never it is finished because it gets everything. Okay, so how should I terminate it? Control D is the thing you terminate the thing. Okay? So as you could see, only with Control D you can terminate read. While for read line with an empty line, a null string, I would say just like finish the thing. So that's the difference between these two guys. You give everything you have in here. I enter these things, and then I try to hit some enter, didn't work, didn't exit, and then Control D. And what's the length of this guy? The length of this guy I have entered is like that. What is the type of that? It is a string, okay, from this guy. And then what is S printed for me? It has printed for me. So that's the point of read line. So in read, actually you read whatever you have inside the input. And then you can split them, okay? You can split them like we discussed in here. You can, I don't want to go through that. You know what I discussed the things in here. Okay, so you can, that's the difference between the read and read line. And again, it is different from these two characters, these two functions, sorry, input and raw input. And what's the last one? That's the read line. Read lines. In read lines, you actually read multiple lines. So when you hit enter, it is entered into different things. So read lines consumes all of the input, just like read, very similar. The result is a list of strings. It separates, when you hit enter, it separates that in the new line inside the list. What happened in here? You have everything inside the string because the type of the S was a string. You have everything, although I have hit here enter, but it doesn't separate the things for me, and it considers all the things here as the string. And definitely I have an enter key in here if you want to reflect that. Well, like I said, it doesn't generate a list of different strings for me. But if I use read lines, like in here, it generates the things for me. Again, to finish that, you need to hit Control D to finish the thing. That's the difference between the two. As with read, trailing new line character are written. With this guy, we slurp all the standard into a single list of lines. Okay. So importantly, these methods provide all of the characters of the input. They do not strip the trailing new line character from each line like the thing it does. So if you print these things, if you have a code like that, import sys line, blah, 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 and a loop to get the lines. I want to have red lines. If I input 1, 2, 3 and terminate it, what it prints for me is like that. It generates an empty line. Why? Because when you were inputting the lines, you used the hit and enter. That slash n as the new line generates a new line for us here. To get rid of that, so there's an empty line here. So you can strip that. So we can do something like that and get rid of the thing. We can say, okay, in the new line, I get everything. Okay, using the read lines, and then I have a counter. What is the size of the lines? That's a list of number of lines I have enter. Then from lines I, the first element, I stripe it with the space. So I get rid of the white space and I have in here, I print it and I'll go to the next step. Okay, so let's see what is the full story. Like I said, in some of them you need to use the Control D. Okay, let's recap what we talked about today. We are in the middle of this course. So in the beginning, we talked about these things. We can run the functions. Like I said, you can put the function very similar to the shell. In Python, you can run the file like that. You can put the name, Python version, Python 3, and then the name of the script you have, and then the name of the argument you have. That was the first thing we discussed today. Okay? The second thing was talking about the module sys. They say there's a function inside the module sys which takes the parameters of the function for us, which is called argv. So if we call it, the result would be a list of the things. The first thing, the first element is the name of the script, and then that would be the list of different parameters inside the list. And you can play with that. You can do it whatever you want to do. You can, for example, in the real world, you can have a function, you can get the name of the student, and then you can put the name of the student inside the database or something like that. So you can call the name of the script and then the name of the student in here, and then the function does for that. You can add some integers in here, and then the function can sum them up, like we have it as an example. Okay, that was the first thing we discussed. The second thing we discussed in here was talking about the std module inside the module sys. Let's say we have some functions for getting input from the user: read line, read, and read lines. Read line was something you used to get some variables, hit the enter, and go to the next line. And at the end of the story, if you just hit enter, it finishes getting the values from the user, and it doesn't continue like the read and raw read you used to do. That was the main point. For the read, you can input whatever you have, and you don't need to enter, and you don't need to stop it or something like that. It takes everything you have. And for the read lines, after any enter, it finishes what you have entered the keyboard, and then the next thing you enter until the next enter would be in the next element of the list it generates. Okay, so we discussed these things together, we compare them together, and we say the input and raw input you need to put the end at the end of the line. We don't have it in here. And also we discussed in the red lines we have some free spaces in here. You need to tweak them if you want to get rid of it. That was the whole story today. These things I have bring here, I should move it to the lab sheet. I will do that for the lab sheet on the Monday, so it's not a part of the lecture. So you need to write some sort of, get some argument like this. That's the name of the script you have. You need to fit some arguments, and then it gets the argument, play with the argument, and get rid of the even number, if it's the odd number. Or you can talk about the outlines. So if you have something like that, that's the first line. Second line, you get rid of the second line, get rid of the fourth line. You have only the outlines you have in. So there are two examples. I'll add them to the lab sheet. The lab sheet for this week is shorter because this afternoon you don't have time for working on the lab sheet. So we'll have only one lab sheet for the Monday. This would be these two examples, these two tasks, plus I think 4 other tasks which we will go through. I'll ask you to go through them. So that's the end of the lecture for today.